Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever in the world you happen to be when you are joining us for Connecting the Dots with Dr. Hughes. Dr. David Hughes, Professor Emeritus at Imperial College London, international speaker, global expert on food and beverage issues, joins us today as he does every month to give us a global perspective, which is quite helpful and always entertaining. That's part of our mission here at the Center for Food Integrity, to provide insight into the emerging issues and trends that are shaping food and agriculture to build trust in today's food system. David, welcome. It is September and already starting to feel like fall.
Yeah, well, fall for you, and of course it's autumn for us. Last month I spent half of it in New Zealand, but I'm here for September, thank the Lord, before extensive travel in October. But there we go.
October headed to Brazil, and I'm headed there today as well. So I will wave at you as I pass. Well, I won't even be anywhere close. So never mind. All right. So this morning, we're going to discuss some of the factors that are driving disruption and a sense of unease in the food system, including tariffs, climate risk, and the evolving retail scene. So let's dive in all the way down under. David, tell us what you discovered during your recent trip and if New Zealanders are dealing with some of the same issues affecting us in the US and the UK.
Right. Well, New Zealand, of course, is midwinter there. And although I was in the North Island, remember there's a North and South Island in New Zealand. The North Island, the midday temperature's only 60 Fahrenheit. That's not too bad. I was in Auckland. But if I'd gone south, that's into New Zealand Alp territory where they have Mount Cook, for example. That's 12,500 feet. I just checked now where it's 0 Fahrenheit today.
Wow.
So thank the Lord I missed that. But food industry issues. The big one, it's the same around the world at the moment, it's food prices. New Zealand, like Australia, actually has very concentrated grocery retail sector. They've got two supermarkets, Woolworths, that will sound familiar to you, and Food Stuff. And those two major supermarket chains have an 80% share of grocery. Incidentally, there is a Costco in New Zealand, but there's one, for goodness sake, just the one. Well, the New Zealand government is in the middle of an excruciating inquiry into whether they are profiteering, whether the supermarkets are profiteering. Frankly, for my mind, this is a sort of cyclical. Whenever you see food prices peak around the world, then there has to be a villain. And in New Zealand, there's only two of them, if you will, the two retailers. But worrisomely, for my mind, is the New Zealand government is saying they're threatening to disassemble them, to cut them in half, saying we need more, so we'll make you more. And frankly, I hope this is political posturing rather than action, because if they broke them up, I think that would lead to higher food prices. Why? Because it would lack of scale for whoever's left, and it would be a real scramble. So that was number one. But consumers are really concerned, as you'd expect, about food inflation. It's 5% in New Zealand, 4% in the US. And where are the pressure points? Same as you, I guess, particularly high for red meat, dairy, and
Mhm.
fruit and veg. And New Zealand consumers are particularly irate about high butter prices. Now, why would that be so? Well, New Zealand is the largest butter exporter in the world, but its domestic price is established on an export price basis, and the
Oh,
consumers
wow.
don't think that's fair, frankly. But there we go. But I also noticed that it was out of season for fruit and veg, as you would expect in winter in New Zealand. But New Zealand bans most imports of fruit and veg all year round because of biosecurity regulations. And as a result, in the off season, when I was there, it's astronomically high fresh fruit and vegetables. I was looking at, for example, blueberries. So, whereas in, say, Kroger, you might pay $3 for a pint of blueberries, in New Zealand, it's seven times that. It was about $21.
Oh, my goodness.
When I'm in NZ, just to pull a leg, actually, I say it's the only country in the world I know where you buy blueberries by the single blueberry because they're so expensive. With regard to exports, New Zealand exports are, if we take it relative to their imports from the US, they run a surplus against you. So New Zealand exports US are 1 billion more than their imports from you.
Hmm.
And in August, it didn't surprise me, but it seems to surprise New Zealanders. US imposed a 15% tariff on New Zealand exports into the US, and that meant food imports. And so, what do they export to you? Lean beef from the dairy herd, of course, which is added to beef trimmings for ground beef in the USA for hamburgers. Kiwi fruit, they're the world's biggest kiwi fruit producers, and they complement California's seasonal supply. And what about milk powder? That's a major exporter to you too, which ends up in infant formula. So tariff it may be, but I think that's going to lead to slightly higher prices in the USA, if anything, for goodness sake. Um, but actually, what intrigued me was that they're a little peevish about this 15% tariff, but they're more concerned about the higher tariffs placed on some of their competitors. Why are they worried about that? Because they can see them shifting their market from the US to other countries where New Zealand is also placed. And they say it sort of destabilizes, if you will, international trade. It disrupts international trade flows. And you can feel that instability. It's almost palpable in New Zealand. And it's unease about the future. And so they're holding back on food industry investments. I see that in many countries, frankly.
Well, David, I'm going to be a little sad if that 15% tariff also impacts New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but that's an entirely different story. So,
Oh, yes, it's a big export.
all right, so let's dig a little deeper on the topic of food prices while we are there. Move beyond Sauvignon Blanc, but food prices have been top of mind for quite some time. Tariffs and trade aren't the only things affecting price. The weather is also having an impact. It's been a very hot, dry summer in Europe.
Yes, yes, yes. As you say, our food price inflation, same as New Zealand, 5%, same products, dairy, red meat, egg prices, as it is in the US, of course. Chocolate, of course, although as a side, I was intrigued looking at this, that in Europe, we consider chocolate bars as a sort of routine grocery purchase.
Hmm.
In my own household, like when we're ordering from Tesco online, we'll have a bar once, 1 bar per week. Whereas in the US, you tend to be much more impulse driven. You could say that about Americans, I think, Charlie. You're more impulse driven, but that's another matter. But back to high food prices and climate factors. Yes, we've had the driest spring and the hottest summer on record. Major food producing areas, which in our small island, that's the east side, they're in drought. And frankly,
Hmm.
that's a word you hardly ever hear in the UK. Drought. I mean, normally we're complaining about the wet weather, as we did last year. So 2024, poor harvest because of extensive record wet weather. So the combination of too dry and hot 25, too wet in 24, puts us in a position where the expectation is that food prices will be lifted by the high production, by the low production and the higher production, higher food prices because of low production. I was talking actually to Bird's Eye Peas, and they tell me that they've had the earliest harvest and the lowest yield
Hmm.
on record this year. And their view is yes, for vegetables and particularly field vegetables with insufficient water for irrigation, potato, carrots, etc., will be real pressure on that. And it's sort of just indicative, Charlie, really, of higher climate risk in global agriculture. You were starting to expect extreme weather. And so, from a farmer point of view, we just to be more agile in crop planning and crop production. So it's challenging for farmers and their food industry customers. But then, if I put my consumer hat on, my household hat on, it's been a cracking good year for families on holiday in the UK. We don't normally expect very hot weather and lots of sunshine, and we've had it in loads of it. While I was away, long-suffering Susan Hughes at home here, she had for 10 days she had close to 90 Fahrenheit in Southwest.
Wow.
And of course, we don't have any aircon. Why not? Because in past we never needed it. But we're rethinking that, frankly, Charlie. It's becoming more frequent that we get over 80 Fahrenheit. That's a big deal for us.
Well, we struggle to find enough air conditioning technicians here, so we're probably not likely to export any of those regardless of tariffs. So you'll just have to figure out how to open windows and turn on some more fans. All right, final topic. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty in the food system between trade, changing weather and patterns. Another aspect we see changing is food retail, which is fascinating. So tell us a little bit about the trends you're seeing among supermarkets, because I think what you're going to introduce here is really going to be an interesting model. We'll see how it continues to expand across North America.
Right. Okay. Well, my weekly comic, if you will, the trade paper on the food industry is called The Grocer. And it has a competition for the best supermarket chain of the year. And in 2025, the winner was Lidl, Lidl, a German hard discounter, which you have in the USA. I'll come back to that in a minute. And what's more, Lidl won the best supermarket of the year for the second year running. So
Hmm.
it's a hard discounter like Aldi. And as you know, similar approach to Aldi. 3,600 or so SKUs products. So, a fraction of what a major supermarket would have.
Right.
80% private label. Those quirky non-food lines, which change every week, I think they're normally focused on males who go in and end up leaving with jackhammers that they never expected to buy in the first place. And then they've got to hide them in the shed from their wives. In Lidl, it's called the middle of Lidl, and it's extraordinarily popular. Well, Lidl arrived 30 years ago in the UK from Germany, just like Aldi. And by next month in the UK, they'll have 1,000 stores. It's
Wow.
UK's fifth largest grocery retailer with a 10% national market share. Aldi has 12%. Both are growing, and within a couple of years, they're going to have 25%, a quarter of total grocery market share in the UK.
Wow.
If I contrast that with you, at the moment, Aldi and Lidl have only got a 3% combined market share. But as you know, Aldi is the fastest growing retail grocer retailer in the USA. So, but I'm fascinated by their evolution in the UK. When they arrived, they only offered packaged groceries. My recollection was they were still in cardboard boxes. They had very few fresh foods. They weren't perceived as a fresh food retailer at all. And what have they done? They've added much more fresh food. If you take fruit and veg in the UK, both Lidl and Aldi overtrade versus traditional supermarkets on fresh fruit and vegetables,
Huh.
which is quite a leap. Uh, uh, Lidl has added a hugely successful fresh bakery, so you can get your San Francisco sourdough there for a fraction of the cost of the so-called artisan bakers. They're very good at getting on the best side of their consumer base. They support national institutions and national events. So, for example, Aldi was the first to sponsor the British Olympic team, which, I thought had its moments given that they have a German background. They're very good at building long-term relationships with British farmers and investing with them. Aldi has just done so big time with a major apple producer where they're co-investing.
Hmm.
And but what took me for Lidl and why I'd mentioned them in the first place is that they've just launched an initiative called Live Well. And the Live Well initiative gets the thumbs up from a government commission on, they call it Food, Planet and Health. And that commission, rather controversially, has got the goal of cutting consumption of foods like red meat and sugar by 50% by 2050. Well,
Wow.
so there's a Live Well logo, and any product with a Live Well logo in Lidl must have green traffic lights, which we use to show food safety and nutrition, on any high fat, salt, sugar products.
Hmm.
And it sort of intrigues me that who's leading the charge on healthy you and healthy planet? Well, it's a UK hard discounter who 30 years ago, as I mentioned, when it came across our borders, was a very low cost, low price, boxes on the floor retailer.
Fascinating, David. And we've got just a couple minutes left. So let's expand on that just a little bit. One of the things we're following closely here in the US is the Make America Healthy MAHA movement. You mentioned similar efforts and clearly what Little is doing may be tied to that. So what's happening?
Right. Yes. Yes. I'd love to follow what's happening, particularly with your Secretary of Health, Kennedy, rattling his saber and provoking a response, as far as I could see, from confectionery folk like Mars Wrigley to try and get ahead of what they think is coming in terms of possible regulation. So the removal of artificial colors and dyes in candies. And we see exactly the same thing happening in the UK. So an example for my mind would be by far our leading potato chip brand in the UK is from PepsiCo, whereas it's called Lay's in the USA, it's called Walker's in the UK. And in anticipation that health regs will soon be enforced, they've launched a swath of of potato chips or crisps, as we so whimsically call them, which are high fat, salt, and sugar compliant. And actually,
Huh.
just reminds me, we saw similar actions in the UK by confectionery companies. If I look back a few years ago, when the government started to flag we're going to have sugar tax, and the major confectionery companies then sort of whipped the sugar as much as they could out of their products so that they wouldn't be taxed. So I think that's healthy. I like to see that. That responding before there's government action.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. So much, it's such a dynamic environment right now in food and agriculture, as it always is, but particularly you bring that to us on a global scale. And David, we're so grateful for that perspective. So thank you so much. You can join us again next month on October the 2nd for the fastest 15 minutes in food with Dr. David Hughes. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and David, safe travels.
Thank you, and you too, Charlie.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Bye bye now.
Bye bye.